introduction to worldview. And the reason that we're going to start with this, before we really get into the nitty-gritty of what the Mama Bear Workshop is about, which is education, is because we want to make sure that we understand the context of this culture war, quote-unquote, education war that we're all part of, and why we are discussing curriculum in the way that we are. And as believers, it's really important that we don't see this primarily as a political fight, because that's the way it's discussed. And I'm hoping to set the stage here so that we see it as much more a clash of worldviews, and not just a clash of worldviews, but a clash of competing religions that are taking place in classrooms. And when we understand that, I think it affects the way that we engage with this. So, in my introduction to worldview, I'm going to start this by proposing this little debate that you're going to see on the screen. Is this a 6 or is this a 9? And you've probably been in some kind of a, ethics or debate class where you've seen something like this and everybody argued about what the correct answer to the question was. And very often people will say, well, if we want to resolve this debate, what we need to do is get people on the same side so they see it from the same perspective. And then, of course, they will agree. However, we know as a matter of logic that just because two people agree about something does not mean that they are correct. And the goal here is to actually find the truth in life, not just to agree with our neighbors. So how do we look at something like this and not just come to agreement, come to agreement about the truth? And the fact is, that has a lot to do with what we assume is true about the thing that we are discussing. And we're going to revisit this in just a moment after I provide a definition of worldview for us. And this room has probably had some worldview conversations before, and so the definition I'm going to offer you here is not necessarily the best one, but I think it's helpful, and I hope it helps you tonight, which is that worldviews are our assumptions about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Every single person that you know has a worldview. Most people are not conscious of our worldview, and most people have not sat down and done what we're about to do, which is think about the components of our worldview. What do I think about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny? Now, what are the components of these elements? Origin. The question is basically, where did I come from? And I don't mean your parents. Where did we as a species, as humanity, come from? And there are basically two answers to this question culturally. And the first is naturalism, that we as a species emerged. Nothing became something, and something became a single-celled organism, and over eons of time, a single-celled organism became us. That's essentially naturalism. There's, of course, a Christian creation story, which is part of a broader creation stories. Christianity has one creation story, and there are others, and that is that God spoke us into being. God pre-existed the universe. He created the universe by speaking, and by virtue of that, and then he created us as the crown of his creation. And then there's like multiverses, and YouTube has some kind of third-party candidate explanations for where we came from. But in general, there's some kind of creation story, and there's naturalism. Those are the two options. The second question about meaning. Does my life matter, and why? The answer to this question has a lot to do with your answer about origins. Because if you're a naturalist, if you assume that we came from nothing, that our existence is an accident, then it makes sense that the Gnostics are correct. And the Gnostics would say, no, life has no meaning at all. Because why could it have meaning? Because it's all randomness. There are people who are naturalists who will say, well, life doesn't have ultimate meaning, but it has meaning because I love to play with my grandkids, I like to sail, I like to read books, I like to, be philanthropic. It gets me out of bed in the morning, it gives me some purpose. It's not ultimate meaning, but it's enough for me, and it's enough to keep me going in my life. So life has meaning such as I think it has meaning. The biblical answer to this question is that our life has meaning because we're created in the image of God, and that's what gives us meaning. Not because of the things that we do, not the things that we're capable of, but simply because we are image bearers of God, of the one who created us. So yes, our life has meaning. The third answer to this question, about morality. How do I know what is right and wrong? Does the law determine what is right and wrong? Does public opinion determine what is right and wrong? Does God determine what is right and wrong? Increasingly, there's a growing number of people these days who would say right and wrong don't even exist. Those are social constructs created by the powerful to oppress the powerless. And once we free ourselves from this silly primitive notion that right and wrong are actual things, then we can all live authentically and freely as we were intended, or not intended, of course, to be, because there's no intent. That's the catch. But as we should be, right? Free from any rules and restraints, just to follow our feelings in our heart to personal fulfillment. Lots of different answers to this question about how do we know what right and wrong is. The final component of our worldview, destiny. What happens when I die? Do I merely cease to exist because the natural world is all there is? All I am is brain activity, and once my brain activity ceases, then I cease to exist. We fade to black. Do we, as Scripture says, stand before our Creator and give account for every thought, word, action, and deed in this life? And then we get to either enter into His eternal presence because we have exchanged our sin for His righteousness, and therefore we are justified and now qualified to be in the presence of God for all eternity, or are we separate from Him because we refused to submit and thereby participate in that great exchange? Or are we living in a giant karmic equation where as long as we do slightly more good, then we do bad, as compared to Hitler, then we get to be in heaven, and if we do slightly less good than bad, as compared to Hitler, then we will be in hell for eternity, right? These are kind of the options. Now, let's revisit our debate about this 6 or this 9, having done this. And what might become clear, and if we were to have a discussion, we don't have time for that tonight, but inevitably somebody says, if we're trying to find the truth of this, somebody will say, we need to ask the person who made it. What did they intend? And then we can know what the truth of the matter is. We can settle it once and for all and know the truth. But of course, that answer comes with a premise. It comes with an assumption that someone put it there. That there is intentionality behind it. If I told you that this debate was actually happening on Mars, and these are the first 2 humans on the Martian surface, because Elon flew them up there, of course. And so they're walking around, and they discover this thing that to their eyes looks something like a 6 or 9. We could probably conclude that it's a coincidence, because we have no reason to believe that intelligence has ever been on the surface of Mars. Therefore, there could not be intent read into this thing that we are seeing. We can assume purposelessness on the surface of Mars. That debate, where did it come from, and what is it for, is at the heart of almost all the things that we are debating culturally. And I think the gender debate is the best to actually back up, because they're going to read this and they're going to miss this point real quickly, because that's a bunch of text. But the gender debate, I think, illustrates this best, because what does it mean to be a 6 or a 9? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? Your answer to that question will have a lot to do with what you believe about where it came from and what the purpose is. If you have a naturalist assumption about origin, about where we came from, that our life is without any purpose because no one made us for any purpose, then it actually makes a lot of sense that this teaches me nothing. There's nothing to learn from it because there's no one who could have embedded it with meaning that I have a burden to know about, because all of it is random. And if that's my starting assumption, then it makes sense that, hey, if my mind doesn't like my body, why not modify my mind? Why not modify my body so that my mind likes it? Because I've determined that my mind is in charge, and there's nobody else who should tell me that my mind isn't in charge, because what other truth could there possibly be? So since my mind is in charge, and my mind wants my body to be different, and my mind tells my body that that's the way to be happy, who are you or anyone else to tell me that's not the way it is? Because there's no truth. There's no intent. There's no purpose. But if we're operating under assumption that in fact we were created on purpose for a purpose, it is absolutely in my best interest to look at this and say, where did it come from and what's it for? And if there's an answer to that question, it's in my best interest to know that answer and live accordingly. So your answer to what is a boy or a girl, what is a male or a female, what is a 6 or 9, has everything to do with how you understand its origin. Where did it come from? Now, as we can see, the various answers to origin, meaning, morality, and destiny have everything to do with the way we live and think about absolutely everything. Now let's summarize how this works. How does our worldview affect how we see ourselves as individuals? A person with a Christian worldview. Slide to that next slide. Now, I know this is small, but we'll read this, and hopefully you can see it. How your worldview affects your view of yourself. The person on the left, this is a summary of a Christian worldview and how some people see themselves. They will say, I was created by God with a purpose, and my life has meaning because I am created in God's image. God determines right and wrong. He revealed his will to us in the Bible, and I will give account to God for my decisions when I die. That's the summary of how a Christian would think about themselves. However, the person sitting right next to him, cubicle right next to him, looks very similar to him, has a very different worldview, and would say this: my existence is an accident and is without ultimate meaning or purpose other than when I do it. I determine for myself what is right and wrong. I am not accountable to God for the things I do in this life, and what I do in this life has no effect on the next life, if there is one. Based on your assumptions about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, you have a very different understanding of who you are, of your place in the world. Therefore, it makes sense that these two people will respond very differently to circumstances of life, to a terminal diagnosis, to getting a job, to not getting a job, to having their kid do something foolish. How are they going to respond? To having desires. This is what my feelings are telling me. How will they respond? Go to the next slide. On the right, the naturalist will say something like, if I'm going to make a decision, I am the final authority, right and wrong. I should trust my feelings. My feelings guide me to truth. Do what makes you happy. And that's how most of our friends and neighbors, and frankly, research says most people in the church are operating today. That's their calculation. But if we have a Christian understanding of reality, a Christian understanding of ourselves, especially in relationship to God, we will have a different process for making a decision, which is, I should obey God even when I don't feel like it. I can't trust my feelings. My feelings guide me to hell. Do what God says is right. Now, because I believe this is the right answer to the question, this is why I'm ruling all the Disney movies for my children. Because every time the voice would emerge from the ether and say, others may follow the rules, but I will follow my heart. We pause the movie and I'd say, kids, where do we go when we follow our heart? And they'd roll their eyes and say, hell, Dad. I'd say, yes. Now that we have established that, we will continue. But I mean, it's an important point that, of course, we need our kids to understand. And so, the way we view ourselves, the way we respond to life, has everything to do with our assumptions about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Now, we can go ahead and move on to that next slide, and then the next one. Because not only does our worldview influence how we view ourselves and the things that we do in our personal lives, it also influences our understanding about all of human history. Our understanding of humanity. Because there is a biblical understanding of humanity, which is creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. This is not my framing. It's just helpful right now. What is the short version of humanity according to the gospel? Creation. God created us on purpose. What's the problem? The fall. Sin came into the creation that God created it and broke it. That's why we have all these problems. So what's the solution to the problems that we see in the world around us? Redemption through Jesus. And what is our hope in this life? It's in a restored heaven and earth when Jesus comes back once and for fixes the sin problem, fixes the death problem, so we are restored to the original Genesis 1, Genesis 2 state that God created us for. That's how we understand history. And because this is our understanding of history, this is why we have modest expectations for this week. Because we just believe, because we live in a sinful world, everything is not going to go perfectly. And I can be happy and joyful, which is, of course, better than happiness, despite the fact that bad things are going to happen this week, because my hope is ultimately in a new heaven and new earth, which is assured of eventually coming into reality, and I get to experience that. However, all of this flows from my biblical assumptions about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. If I do not share that, this is not my perspective, but I have my own naturalist understanding of reality, which is, it's not creation, it's naturalism that brought us into being. The fall is not necessarily the problem. I'm going to pause here and highlight a point of agreement that you and I have with everyone that we know. There's not many of those, so pay attention. This is a good one, right? There's a point of agreement. There's something that you, everybody at Thanksgiving, and everybody in your neighborhood agrees upon. And that is this. Everything is messed up. Nobody looks around, reads the news, travels about the world, and says, it is all exactly as it should be. We recognize that things should be better. However, we have a very different understanding of what has caused the problem. And the gospel tells us sin inside each of our hearts is the root of the problems that we see around us. But because there ain't no such thing, according to their worldview, as sin, they have to figure out a way to understand all the stuff that's broken and messed up in the world. So, setting sin aside, how do we explain this? I know. It's injustice that exists in the world. We were born right. I've got a bumper sticker on my car that reminds me of that. So there's nothing wrong with me. So why do people do bad things despite the fact that we're all born fine? It's because people do bad things to them. Because there are systems that create injustices that treat people unkindly. And because people are treated unkindly and unjustly, they do bad things that they otherwise would not be inclined to do. So, what's the solution to the problem? It's not redemption through Jesus, it's revolution. Right? That's why we have that fist. Once me and my friends get the power from you and your friends, then we can fix all the systemic injustices that you and your friends created, and all the people will be dancing on clouds and rainbows and unicorns as they were born to do. So where's my hope? It's not in a restored heaven and earth when Jesus comes back, because that's not even in the realm of possibility. The only hope that I have is in the utopia that I will create here and now, once me and my friends get the power from you and your friends and fix all the systems that you broke. That's why I'm so disappointed about what happened last Tuesday. Because the revolution has been stalled, and I am in despair. Because in my worldview, there is no plan B. There is no justification for hope when all the systems that have caused all the problems will continue to cause all the problems. And me and my friends didn't get the power that we needed in order to fix it. And so when this is my worldview, what do I spend all of my time doing? I spend none of my time working on me because nothing's wrong with me. I'm fine. I spend all my time working on you, and you're not responding well, and I'm exhausted. And that's how a lot of people live. Which is why secularism is inherently depressing. Which is why we live in a world that is quite depressed. Because we have no framework, we have no worldview that allows us to understand the brokenness in the world and still have any joy. Joy is irrational for the naturalist, who really has come to terms with the brokenness of the world. And sometimes their circumstances are such that you and I would not look at that and say, boy, isn't that joyful? Because it's not. And they have no way to understand the deep, deep brokenness that we all exist. Because there's no meaning, there's no purpose, there's no hope, because this is all there is. And when that's your understanding of reality, despair, depression actually makes a lot of sense. Actually makes it. And this is why their hope So much of it is in politics. Now let's talk about some very specific issues and make some connections here. My body, my choice is a slogan that you have no doubt heard and probably associate with the issue of abortion. More recently, people have associated this with vaccines. But I would like to convince you that my body, my choice is not really a political slogan. It is a statement of faith. And if you go to a church that recites the Apostles' Creed, this slogan performs much of the same work that the Apostles' Creed does, because it reminds the secularist and the naturalist of what they really believe to be true about origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. I am in charge of myself. I determine for myself what is right and wrong. The only meaning that I have in life is this meaning that I give it. And so, something like abortion, if you believe that my life is without purpose, there is no such thing as right and wrong, other than what I decide is right and wrong, my life only has the meaning that I give it, the purpose of my life as determined by me is to be happy, and right now this pregnancy doesn't make me happy. So it's logical when I conclude, because the purpose of my life is to be happy, the thing that's going to make me happy is to not be pregnant anymore. Why shouldn't I? Who are you or anyone else? There is no standard of truth that can hold me to account and say, no, that's wrong. It feels right, therefore it is right. It's my body. It's my choice. The sexual revolution makes very much the same argument. If my life is without purpose or meaning, the purpose of my life is determined by me is to be happy, and I get to determine for myself what is right and wrong. Well, the thing that's going to make me happy right now, and the thing that I believe is right, is to do whatever I want with whoever I want, because that's going to give me happiness. And who are you or anyone else to tell me that I shouldn't be able to do that? Because it's my body, it is my choice. Get out of the way, bigot. The next issue we have here, we talked about the gender issue. We'll make the point again. What is the argument being made? Because my life is without any purpose, in the absolute sense, I can determine for myself what is right and wrong. Purpose of my life is determined by me is to be happy, and the thing that's going to be happy right now is to modify my body to come into alignment with my mind. Who are you or anyone else to tell me that I shouldn't be able to do that? It's my body. It's my choice. Physician-assisted suicide is going to become a more common issue for precisely the same reason. If my life has no ultimate purpose, and the purpose of my body is determined by me is to give me happiness, if I'm experiencing physical or emotional pain, it's an obstacle to happiness, why should I not be able to check out anytime I want to? It's my body. It's my choice. This is also the reason why people are increasingly trying to destigmatize prostitution. Oh, we're going to brand this as sex work, and we're going to mainstream and legitimize it. Why? Because if we belong to ourselves, if our life has no ultimate purpose, if the purpose of our life is determined by us to be happy, the thing that's going to make me happy is to commoditize my body because I like it or I just want the money. Who are you or anyone else to tell me I shouldn't be able to? It's my body. It's my choice. There is no standard of reality, of truth, that could tell me it's wrong. Now, context of the debates that we're having here, one thing that's really important to realize and remember, I think, is because everything that we're debating is really a conflict of worldviews. It's not about intelligence or intentions. Because here's what happens left to right, and I know you've seen this a million times, is that I have a debate with somebody, and I'm gonna bring them in. Corey, you're sitting here, so I'll just use you as an example, right? Corey's my friend, we've been discussing something. Corey's wrong about everything, and I know that. And so I'm trying to persuade Corey to be right, and I'm bringing her the information that convinced me. And so I'm going to take it over to Corey, and I'm going to give it to her. I'm going to dispense my knowledge and wisdom to her. And then she's going to read it. And to my shock, amazement, and horror, Corey has not immediately been persuaded and come to my side. So what do I conclude? Because I gave you the information, Corey, and yet you have still not changed your mind. You must be stupid. Because here it is. Right? Here it is. What's wrong with you? Can you not process information? Can you not read? But here's the challenge. Corey and I have been going back and forth. And she can form sentences. and she can make arguments. And she actually doesn't seem stupid, she just acts stupid. And so I'm a little conflicted because the "you're really dumb" argument has some holes in it. But here's the issue. Because I told Corey that everything she thinks is actually killing people. Her ideas just aren't wrong, they're really harmful, and I told her that. So she's on notice of the fact that her bad ideas are harming people, and she still hasn't changed. And so if she's not stupid, she just must be evil. Because she wants the harm that her ideas are leading to. So two options that I have, and I'm kind of debating which one it is. Either she's stupid or she's evil. We recognize that, right? That's from right to left and left to right. It's, of course, overly simplistic in all sorts of ways. But what seeing these debates as really a conflict of worldviews and religions is it has very little to do with intelligence. Statistically, half of us are below average intelligence, right? So we got to confront that. But almost nobody has bad intentions. Very few of us are sociopaths. So people aren't trying to do bad things. But we should understand that somebody who starts from the place that my life is purposeless, it is without meaning, there is no truth. I get to determine for myself what is right and wrong, and I'm accountable to no one or nothing for the things I do in my life. Should reach different conclusions than the person who says, I was created on purpose for a purpose by somebody who loves me, revealed his will to me, and I'm going to be accountable to him for the things that I do in this life. If those two people think the same and live the same, that's the real problem. So for us, when we're encountering people who disagree with us, we can just kind of wind that back. And let's set the gender argument aside and say, hey, where do you think we came from? What's the purpose of life? Who determines right and wrong? Once we establish that, then we can begin to understand, oh yeah, so no wonder we don't quite see this marriage issue or this sexuality issue or this abortion issue the same way. And once we can come to agreement on the more fundamental questions, the political questions should start to resolve themselves. But to illustrate the fact that this is really a spiritual war, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. This is from the Evangelical Church of Satan in Nebraska. At the National Day of Prayer a couple of years ago, here's what they say. At the Nebraska Capitol, this year's gathering was sponsored by the Nebraska Family Alliance. They want to control your body and your sex life, but Satanism teaches the truth. Only you are entitled to that control. Right? The mask is kind of off. They're trolling a little bit, of course, because the Satanists are often just like atheists who want to poke their finger in the eyes of the Christians. But Satan is chuckling, right? And that's how you get things like this. From a Pride Parade a year and a half ago, Satan loves. Why is Satan the one who loves you? What does Satan never ask you to do? What does Satan never ask you to do? Change. What's the beginning of the gospel? Repent and believe. And this is why believers also need to understand the evangelistic gospel necessity of engaging these lives. Because once Satan has convinced us that you're born right the first time, it's immoral not to live authentically. You live authentically by following your heart. You've been inoculated against the gospel, and that first person who comes to you and says, repent and believe. Oh, you hate me because you want me to change. The gospel hates you if you're a secularist who's been brought up in this idea. And Satan's been very clever in packaging his most damaging lies in this wrapping that looks political, so half the church is like, we're not going to touch that one. And so you have a bunch of people in kindergarten through second grade being inoculated against the gospel because they're being told, never change, there's nothing wrong with you, and anybody who ever tells you there is hates you. So, if Satan, of course, is the one who loves us, it follows then that not today Jesus is how we, as secularists and naturalists, equip ourselves for this spiritual war, right? We're going to make sure that we resist all calls to temptation, that we follow our heart as purely and zealously as we can in pursuit of living authentically. This is why we're really fighting a spiritual war and not a natural war. It's a great setup to the next part of our conversation here, and I'll ask us to throw up the next set of slides, because this background